Zara stood at the far end of the long waiting hall, her arms wrapped around her child who clung to her tightly, eyes wide with hunger and fear. The room was filled with voices, footsteps, and cold lights that never blinked. Above them, screens displayed names and colors. Green meant accepted, red meant rejected. And hers had stayed red for 3 rotations now, every time her name came up. The recruiters barely glanced before pressing the reject tab. Her application bounced back as unsuitable for duty, unfit due to dependent, or simply denied without reason. Her breath fogged in the recycled air as she stepped forward again, hoping the next recruiter might at least listen. Aliens of all shapes and sizes passed her, some in polished uniforms, some in armor with glowing visors. None of them looked at her. A few gave her side glances, some muttered something in their tongue and sneered. One alien with glassy blue skin snorted as he walked past and said loud enough for others to hear. Another breeder trying to play soldier again. She said nothing, just held her child tighter and tried not to show the hurt. Her daughter, barely old enough to speak properly, whispered, "Mama, are we going to sleep on the floor again tonight?" Zara knelt and wiped a tear from the child's cheek and said gently, "Not if someone gives us a chance today." But deep down she wasn't sure anymore. The rejection notices came faster now, her military records ignored, her medals deleted from the system, her past erased just because she chose to keep her child after the war ended. 3 guards stood at the end of the hallway near the recruiter zone, scanning applicants one by one, letting through only those with clean records and no dependents. When Zara reached the line again, the scanner flashed yellow and the guards stepped in front of her. One said with a metallic voice, "You have been processed already. Wait period not complete. Return after 2 cycles." She tried to explain, her voice low but firm. "There's an update in my clearance file. Please let me through." But the guard simply raised his hand toward her chest and said, "Return to queue or be removed." The crowd behind her was getting restless, more aliens pushing to get past her. Someone shouted, "Move it. We don't have time to wait on your brat." She stepped back slowly, her child clutching her leg tighter, and returned to the wall where she had left her single bag. It had 1 ration bar left, half a bottle of water, and an old photo of her squad before they died on Dulcar 9. The lights dimmed slightly as another ship docked. Heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor, but Zara didn't turn. She was tired of looking, tired of hoping. But then she felt a strange pause in the air, a stillness that made even the recruiters look up. A human had entered the hall, tall, wearing a dark gray command coat with old battle scars across the chest and sleeve. His face was calm, but his eyes scanned like a weapon. The silence followed him as he moved through the room. People made way not because he demanded it, but because something about him made it impossible to stand in his path. He stopped right in front of Zara without a word, looked down at her child first, then at her. She straightened her back, unsure what to expect, ready to be told to move, ready to be insulted again. But he simply said, "Zara, ex-field medic, 72nd Shock Division. 2 rotations frontline service. Court-martial dismissed under Section 5. Am I correct?" Her breath caught in her throat. No one had mentioned her division in over a year. She nodded slowly and replied, "Yes, that's me." The man looked at her hands, her stance, then at her child who looked up at him without fear. He said nothing for a few seconds, then asked, "Do you still want to fight?" Zara stared at him, unsure if it was a trick, another test to humiliate her. But the look in his eyes was not mocking or cold. It was curious, like he truly wanted to know. "I don't want a handout," she said quietly. I just need a way to earn my place again." The human officer reached into his coat and pulled out a small datapad, tapped a few times, and handed it to the nearest guard without speaking. The guard scanned it, and his eyes widened slightly before stepping back. He said quickly, "Override." Protocol confirmed. Applicant Zara granted immediate interview under Commander Hale's discretion. Murmurs spread in the room like fire. Some aliens watched with shock, others with disbelief. A few looked angry. One of the recruiters approached fast and said, "Sir, we can't allow a non-standard entry, especially one with a dependent. It violates section." But the officer raised his hand and replied calmly, "Section 19C, refugee combatants with active service records may bypass standard channels upon direct recommendation from command. On command, she's in." Zara followed him without speaking, her child still holding her hand. The hallway behind them felt heavier now, filled with dozens of alien eyes burning with questions, doubt, even hatred. But she didn't care anymore. Someone had finally seen her, not as a problem, not as a failure, not as a burden, but as a soldier. Commander Hale didn't say much as they walked, but his presence gave her a strange comfort, not safety, but something stronger, like a promise waiting to be made. When they reached the lift, he looked at her again and said, "We have a place for someone like you, but it's not safe, not clean, and not easy. If you fail, I take the fall. If you succeed, you change everything for others like you. Can you handle that?" Zara nodded once, her voice steady now. "I've handled worse." As the lift doors closed behind them, the last thing she saw was the giant red screen in the lobby blinking once, then turning green, her name no longer rejected, but listed as accepted under Commander Override, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself breathe. Commander Hale led Zara and her daughter through a narrow corridor that smelled of burnt metal and machine oil. The walls were covered with dented panels and emergency patches. Faint warning lights blinked overhead, as if the base itself was held together by stubbornness alone. Unlike the polished recruitment stations filled with bright lights and fake smiles, this place felt alive. It pulsed with energy from soldiers who didn't belong anywhere else. And Zara could feel it with every step. The lift dropped suddenly, before sliding sideways into a hidden tunnel. The silence between her and Hale stretched longer with each second. Her daughter leaned against her quietly, eyes darting from corner to corner, but she didn't speak either. She had learned when silence meant safety. When the doors finally opened, a wave of heat rushed in, and the sound of clashing metal, shouting voices, and drilling machines echoed all around. They stepped into what looked like an underground training zone, makeshift but strong, battle-scarred but active. Soldiers in mismatched armor sparred with each other. Drones hovered above recording movements. A few alien species trained side by side, but gave Zara sharp glances the moment they noticed her. Commander Hale walked straight through without stopping. His presence parted the room like a blade through water. But even his authority didn't stop the whispers behind them. "Is that the mother they brought in?" one voice hissed. "She's going to get someone killed," another grunted. "Bringing a child to a military post." "How pathetic," said one more. Zara heard every word, but she didn't react. Her steps stayed firm. Her daughter's hand stayed in hers, and her focus stayed forward. She had survived worse than whispers. Hale finally led them to a private room at the far end of the training zone. The door opened with a hiss and revealed a simple space. 2 bunks, a desk, and 1 clean locker. It was more than Zara expected. Far more than what she had in the refugee shelter. "You'll stay here for now," Hale said, his voice sharp but not unkind. Your daughter too. Food and supplies are provided daily. Your first evaluation starts in one cycle. Zara looked around and nodded, her voice calm. Understood. Holly didn't move immediately instead. He looked at the child who sat quietly on the bunk, eyes scanning the walls like she was memorizing everything. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box, handed it to her, and said, "This is a recon drone core, reprogrammed into a learning AI. It'll help her stay sharp and maybe keep her out of trouble." The girl took it silently, her hands small but steady, her eyes not showing fear, only curiosity. Holly gave one final nod and turned to leave, but Zara spoke before the door closed. "Why me?" she asked. "Why not anyone else?" Holly paused for a long moment before replying, his back still turned. "Because everyone else looks away," he said. "I don't." The door slid shut and left Zara with a question that echoed louder than any scream. The next cycle began early. The alarm buzzed like a broken siren, and lights flashed white inside her room. She got dressed quickly in the standard gray combat gear, adjusted her boots, and braided her hair tight behind her head. Her daughter stayed asleep under the blankets, hugging the drone core close to her chest. Zara walked into the training area where 5 others stood in line. 3 humans, 1 insectoid, and 1 lizard-like alien with thermal bands across his armor. All of them turned when she joined the formation. None of them smiled. The instructor, a rough-skinned cyborg with mechanical arms and glowing red eyes, stepped forward and barked the rules. No talking, no complaining. You either pass or get thrown out. Commander's orders. The drills began fast and brutal. Physical combat, weapon assembly, target tracking, and tactical response. Zara held her ground, pushed her limits, ignored the pain in her knees, and the sweat blinding her eyes. She matched the humans blow for blow, outpaced the lizard in the sprint run, and dismantled a plasma rifle in record time. But still, the others acted like she didn't exist. Like her effort meant nothing during the hand-to-hand combat round. She was paired with the insectoid, a towering beast with 4 arms and razor-sharp fingers. He looked at her with cold eyes and said nothing. The moment the signal started, he charged with full force, aiming not to test her but to break her. Zara ducked under his first swing, rolled to the side, and slammed her elbow into his side where the armor was weakest. He stumbled but struck back fast, slicing across her shoulder and leaving a burn. She hissed but didn't fall. She used his size against him, dropped low, and kicked out his legs. The fight ended with her on top, her knee pressing into his chest. Hand at his throat. The room went quiet. Then the instructor stepped forward and nodded once. "Pass," he said. The rest of the day was filled with more drills, more tests and more glares from her squad mates. She didn't care. Her muscles ached, her arms shook, but her heart was steady for the first time in a long while. She was back in her element when she returned to her room that evening. Her daughter was already awake, the drone hovering above her, projecting soft light and playing language patterns in a dozen dialects. Zara smiled and sat beside her. The child looked up and asked, "Did you fight today?" Zara nodded and whispered, "Yes, and I won." The next few days followed the same rhythm. Training by day, whispers by night. But slowly something started to change. One of the human squad mates began nodding at her after drills. The insectoid avoided eye contact now, and the lizard stopped laughing when she walked by. It wasn't respect yet, but it was the beginning of something. But peace never lasted in a place like this, and one night, as Zara lay awake watching the ceiling lights flicker, she heard a strange scratching noise from the air vent above, too soft for Normal maintenance, too long for a rodent. She stood up slowly, reached for the old combat knife hidden in her bag, and moved silently toward the sound. Inside the vent, she saw a shadow crawl back into the dark just as she approached. Too fast for her to catch, too quiet for it to be natural. She narrowed her eyes and turned back to check her daughter. The drone core was still glowing, the child asleep, but Zara's instincts screamed louder than ever before. Something was watching them, and whatever it was, it didn't come from Hale's unit. The shadows in the vent were not normal. Zara knew the difference between mechanical hums and unnatural movements. Her instincts were shaped by war and sharpened by survival. So when she heard the same scraping sound again the next night, she didn't hesitate. She waited silently beside the vent, her combat knife held tight, breath steady. Her daughter asleep once more, unaware of what crawled above their heads. The scraping stopped suddenly, followed by a soft metallic clink, like claws tapping a pipe, and then silence. Zara climbed onto the chair beneath the vent, gently removed the cover, and looked inside. The shaft stretched deep and dark, but nothing moved. Still, the scent of burnt oil lingered, mixed with something else, something sour, like decayed plastic or old blood. She sealed the vent again and sat back, thinking. This was not just faulty machinery. Someone was watching, but not with cameras, with eyes. And those eyes had purpose. The next day during training, she moved slower than usual, her arms still healing from yesterday's strike. But her mind was sharper than ever. She scanned every face around her, looking for shifts in behavior. Someone was planting something against her, and she needed to find out who before it was too late. The cyborg instructor barked orders again, pairing her with the lizard soldier this time, a powerful brute named Carr, who had mocked her since day one. Carr grinned and cracked his neck before charging at her. Not holding back, not training. This was a test masked as a threat. Zara dodged, twisted under his arm, struck him in the ribs, and fell back into defensive stance. Carr laughed and swung again, this time catching her side. She grunted but didn't fall. She countered with a leg sweep that knocked him back. The others watched in silence as she stood over him again. After the session, Carr approached her near the water station. His tone changed, still rough but not insulting. He muttered, "You fight like someone who's seen too much." Zara didn't answer. She just walked away, knowing that even small cracks in hate could lead to something useful. Later that night, the whisper started outside her quarters. Soft at first, barely more than breathing. She pressed her ear to the wall and heard fragments of conversation. Two voices speaking in a fast alien dialect, too fast for her translator to catch every word. But she heard her name, she heard child, and she heard remove. She grabbed her blade and opened the door quickly, but the hallway was empty, the sound gone. The lights flickering as usual. She stepped into the hall slowly, checked both ends, then returned inside, her heart racing now, not with fear, but with anger. Whoever was behind this wasn't trying to scare her. They were trying to make her break, trying to push her until Holly had no choice but to send her away. The next morning, alarms blared across the base, loud and sudden, red lights spinning in every corridor, voices shouting orders. The instructors rushed all recruits to the main deck. Zara joined the others, her daughter ordered to stay in the secure quarters under drone protection. The commander stood at the front with two high-ranking officers, one alien and one human, both wearing expressions like they had swallowed acid. Hale's voice was cold when he spoke. A secure weapons room was breached last night, he said. Explosives were triggered remotely. One guard is in critical condition. Evidence was planted. and one name appeared in the access log. The screen behind him lit up, and to Zara's shock, it showed her identification code. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward her, suspicion, anger, betrayal written across every face. Zara stepped forward, voice calm but strong. "I didn't do this." The alien officer snarled. "The system doesn't lie." Holly didn't speak. He just watched her, not with doubt, but with something harder to read, like he was testing something deeper than the surface. "You're suspended from active duty during investigation." The officer continued. "Confined to quarters, escorted by guard drones. Any resistance will be treated as treason." Zara didn't argue, she knew better. She nodded and followed the drones back to her room. Her daughter stood up the moment she entered, eyes wide with worry. "What's happening?" the child asked, voice shaking. Zara knelt and hugged her tight, whispering, "Someone's trying to take us away from here." That night she didn't sleep. She accessed her drone core, the same one Halle had given her child, and began running deep scans, checking for signals, backdoors, anything that might explain how her ID had been used. After hours of searching, she found it, a hidden code buried deep inside the learning AI, an echo of a signal sent from the base's top floor, disguised as a software update. Someone had used the drone to track her patterns, then sent false access codes using her signal trace. Zara copied the data into a secure chip and locked it in her boot. Then she checked on her daughter, who was asleep again, hugging the drone like a toy, unaware that it had been used against them. In the morning, a guard drone arrived with orders to escort her to interrogation. But instead of going quietly, Zara turned to her daughter and whispered something into her ear, something only they would understand. Then she followed the drone, expression calm, but mind racing. The hallway to the interrogation chamber was longer than she remembered, colder too. 2 officers stood waiting inside, one with a recorder, one with a scanner, both watching her like a predator watches its prey. "We have proof you breached the weapons vault," the first one said. "But if you confess now, we can minimize punishment." Zara leaned forward slightly and replied, "Then show me the proof." The officer smirked and tapped the display, showing the access log, her code flashing in red. "Now show me the path the signal took," she said. The officer hesitated, then pulled up the signal trace. And that's when Halle walked in, silent, unreadable. He looked at the screen, then at her, and asked, "You claim this isn't yours?" Zara reached into her boot, pulled out the chip, and handed it to him. "Run that," she said. "You'll see where the real signal came from." Halle didn't move for a moment, then took the chip and inserted it into the wall console. The screen blinked, codes ran across it, and then the truth appeared. The access had been forged from inside the base, not from her quarters, not from her drone, but from the security command office 2 floors above. The officers froze. One of them stepped back. Halle turned slowly toward them, voice like ice. "Get Commander Drake in here now." Zara didn't smile, didn't move. She just stood there, knowing this was only the beginning, because someone powerful wanted her gone, and now she knew why. She was becoming a symbol, not just a mother or a fighter, but proof that someone like her could rise again, and that made her dangerous. Zara stood outside the command center as 2 guards blocked the door, their weapons pointed low but ready. Inside, Halle was confronting the higher command with the evidence she had provided. The chip that proved someone forged her identity was now official base record, yet no one had been arrested, no names revealed, only silence. Her daughter waited in their quarters under drone watch, unaware of the storm circling them. The base felt colder, the walls thicker, and the eyes around her sharper than before. She was no longer a suspect, but she wasn't trusted either. She had become a problem too big to ignore. When the door finally opened, Hale stepped out alone, his expression carved from stone. He didn't speak for a few seconds, just looked at her, his eyes calculating something deeper than orders. "They won't punish their own," he said finally, voice low. "But they can't stop me from doing this." He handed her a sealed mission scroll, the old kind, encrypted and physical, something only used for off-record assignments. Zahra took it slowly, eyes scanning the seal. It bore his signature, and one phrase in red, "Volunteer clearance." "Only, this isn't an order," Hale said. "This is a choice." Zahra opened the scroll and read the mission details. Her breath tightened as she read further. A remote moon called Kavos 13. Classified as toxic atmosphere, uncharted ruins beneath the surface. Believed to hold pre-war data storage units. Previous teams failed or vanished. One signal had activated recently from the depths. "You want me to go alone?" she asked. Hale shook his head. "No, I want you to take your daughter." Zahra blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Take her into a death zone," Hale nodded slowly. "It's a trap, they want you gone. But if you survive, you'll return with more than proof. You'll return with power, something even they can't ignore." Zahra looked down at the scroll again, her fingers tightening around it. "And if I don't survive, then they'll say the problem fixed itself," Hale replied. Zahra returned to her quarters. The drone greeted her daughter with cheerful tones, but the child knew something was wrong. She always did. Zahra knelt and explained the mission. Gently, using simple words, no fear in her voice, only strength. The child listened, then asked, "Do we get to come back this time?" Zahra kissed her forehead and whispered, "We do if we fight smart." The next day, they boarded a small transport ship hidden within the cargo launch schedule. Hale had arranged it quietly. The pilot said nothing, just flew them through the edge of a dying star system and dropped them above a cracked moon covered in acid clouds and burning winds. The ship left them with 2 oxygen suits, a mining drill, and 1 portable shelter unit. Zahra strapped her daughter's suit tightly, checked the filters twice, and activated the drone, now programmed to assist in underground mapping. They descended into the ruins through a fractured crater, the stairs beneath ancient and wet with corrosive dust. Every step echoed into blackness. Their suits hissed with pressure balance. And Zahra kept her knife drawn, even as her vision blurred slightly from the filtered helmet view. Inside the ruins, the walls pulsed with faint energy. Ancient alien symbols glowed dimly as if reacting to their presence. The drone scanned the walls and whispered soft alerts. Pre-Empire technology detected. Unknown data core within range, 500 meters. Zahra moved fast, shielding her child with her body through narrow tunnels. They reached a central chamber with a raised pedestal, and there it stood, the core, a cube-shaped device humming with unstable light. As she stepped closer, the drone beeped rapidly. "Signal match found." This core sent the transmission, but something else moved in the darkness behind them. Zahra turned fast, knife ready, her eyes searching every crack. Then a low growl echoed from the far tunnel. Not mechanical, not natural, something alive. She pulled her daughter behind her, aimed the portable flare toward the sound, and fired. The red light burst forward and revealed a creature part metal, part organic. Eyes like broken glass and limbs twisted by decay. It shrieked and lunged. Zahra swung her knife in a clean arc, slicing into its shoulder. Acid sprayed across her suit. Alarms blared in her helmet. The creature howled and backed away. hissing, then charged again, this time faster. The drone launched a flash pulse that stunned it mid-jump. Zara used the moment to grab the core, lock it into her pack, and pull her daughter into the escape route mapped earlier. The creature recovered fast, chasing them through the collapsing tunnels, walls shaking, dust raining, oxygen low. They reached the surface just as the structure exploded behind them, shockwaves knocking them off their feet. Zara held her child close as the dust covered them. Only the drone shield kept the acid winds from tearing them apart. When the transport ship returned, the pilot stared at them through the sealed hatch. Shock in his eyes, Zara simply nodded, core in hand. Suit torn but sealed, her daughter safe beside her. They returned to base in silence, and this time, Holly met them at the private hangar. Alone. You have it, he asked. Zara handed him the core. It's encrypted, but inside there's proof of the real traitors, names, plans, and more. Holly looked at the child, then back at Zara. And they don't know you survived yet. Let's keep it that way, she said. He nodded in motion for them to follow. Come, it's time. We turned their trap into their trial. But even as they walked away, Zara felt eyes watching again. Unseen from the rafters above, someone had known she would survive. And someone was now afraid, because a mother with nothing to lose had come back from death carrying the truth. And the war for her future was only beginning. Zara sat silently in the debriefing chamber, the lights above flickering weakly as if even the power grid was afraid of what she had brought back. The data core rested inside a reinforced case beside her, untouched since extraction, sealed with both her code and Commander Hale's. Her daughter waited outside under close watch, unaware of what would come next. And though Zara's body still ached from the mission, her mind was alert, sharp, ready. Commander Holly stood across from her, arms crossed, eyes unreadable as always. But there was tension in his jaw, like something had shifted. Decryption begins tonight, he said quietly. The tech team is already preparing a secure room. No one but us will access the data. Zara nodded slowly, but something in his tone felt off, like he was holding something back. She had trusted him with her life, with her child's life, but even that trust had limits. As she left the room, 2 soldiers walked by her, whispering words she couldn't hear. But she recognized the fear in their eyes. It wasn't fear of her. It was fear of what she now represented. That night, the base lights dimmed early. A silent order echoing across the halls. Stay in quarters, do not question. The alert said, no drills, no announcements, just silence stretching like a noose. Zara held her daughter close, trying to keep her calm. The drone hovered above them, flashing soft blue, but even it was quieter than usual. Then the lights cut out completely. Zara was on her feet instantly, knife drawn, suit zipped, her daughter tucked behind the bunk. The drone switched to defense mode and projected a soft shield around the child. Outside, footsteps echoed, slow, controlled. No alarm sounded, no emergency protocol triggered, just boots against steel and breath held tight. Someone stopped outside her door, a beep, then another. The door panel was being hacked from outside. Zara waited behind cover, knife ready. But before the door could open, it shut down with a heavy hiss. The manual override kicked in from the inside. Someone had sealed her in, and the power came back on 2 seconds later. She knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't an attack, it was a warning. The next morning, Holly summoned her alone. This time to a different section of the base, one she had never seen before. Lower level, no guards, just gray corridors and old machinery humming beneath their feet. When she entered the room, she saw the core already plugged into a strange console. 5 figures stood around it, 3 human, 2 alien. all dressed in civilian tech robes, all wearing masks that covered their faces. They didn't speak to her, only watched, and Hale motioned her to stand beside him. "The data is real," he said, voice low. "Names, locations, coded plans, everything, but there's a problem." Zara's eyes narrowed. "What kind of problem?" Hale looked at her with something between guilt and duty. "Your name is in it." Zara's heart froze for a breath. "What?" "One of the logs shows a transmission from your old squad. A distress signal routed through black channels," he said. "It was sent weeks after the squad was listed as killed in action." "That's not possible," she whispered. "I saw them fall. I was the last one left." The masked figures said nothing. One of them simply tapped a console and displayed a time-stamped message, an encrypted recording of her name used in a hidden supply drop. Zara stared at the screen, her mind racing. This was fake. It had to be fake. Someone had planted this. "You know I didn't send that," she said. "You've seen the rest of the data. Someone's trying to use this to discredit the rest." Hales. Silence was answer enough. "They want to bury it all," she said slowly. "They're going to claim I tampered with the core." One of the masked figures finally spoke, voice mechanical and sharp. "We cannot risk this data leaking to public networks. The chaos it could cause would collapse alliances, destroy trade routes, and ignite war." Zara turned toward them, her anger rising. "You're not worried about war, you're worried about control." Another figure stepped forward, this one taller, voice softer. "We can erase your connection, clean your record, your daughter will be safe. But you must agree to never speak of this mission again." Zara stepped back, her knife still strapped under her arm. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her heart knew better. She looked at Hale, searching for anything in his face, but he didn't meet her eyes. "You told me to bring back truth," she said, voice low but firm. "Now you want me to pretend it never happened." Hale finally looked up, pain clear in his expression. "They're giving you a way out." Zara turned and walked out of the room without another word. Her footsteps heavy, the hallway colder than before. She returned to her quarters and found her daughter awake, already dressed, eyes wide, the drone hovering beside her, flashing red. "Mama," the child whispered. "They tried to open the wall." Zara checked the panel and found signs of tampering again. Same pattern, same claws. The Watchers were still here, still waiting. She packed fast, grabbed their essentials, bypassed the camera nodes using an old battlefield code, and moved through the lower service tunnels. No alarms triggered, no lights followed, only silence. They reached the edge of the landing zone where cargo ships waited for refueling. Zara knew she had minutes, maybe less, before Hale realized what she was doing. She hacked into the cargo manifest, registered her daughter as cargo container 7B, then climbed into the supply crate beside her, sealing it from inside, oxygen low. Space tight, but safe for now. As the crate lifted into the ship, Zara kept her daughter close, her voice a whisper. "We're not running, we're finding the right place to be heard." And somewhere far above, back inside the base, Hale stood alone at the console, watching her data file disappear from the registry, his hand resting on the terminal, his voice quiet. "You'll either be a ghost," he said, "or a revolution." The cargo ship shook as it tore through hyperspace lanes, the engines humming like distant thunder. Inside the container marked 7B, Zara crouched low with her daughter beside her, the air thin and cold, their oxygen masks hissing softly with every breath. The drone floated silently above them, light dim to avoid detection, and Zara's hand never left the knife strapped across her chest. She knew Hale had let them go, not because he believed in her, but because he didn't want to be the one to kill her. That mercy was dangerous. It meant someone else would do the job instead. The moment the ship docked at an independent trading station on the edge of neutral space, Zara acted fast. She activated the drone to scramble local security feeds, unsealed the container with a coded override, and slipped into the shadows of the docking bay, her daughter wrapped in a travel cloak, their steps quiet and rehearsed. The station was loud, filthy, crowded with smugglers, traders, and mercenaries of every kind. The perfect place to disappear. The perfect place to be hunted. She checked into a small sleeping pod under a fake name, paid with old war credits no longer traceable, then plugged the backup copy of the decrypted data core into a portable transmitter. She didn't send the files yet. She knew better. Once the truth was out, they would burn everything to find her. She needed allies first, and not just anyone. People who had been burned by the same system that now wanted her erased. The next day, she made her way through the underbelly of the station, where mercs drank poison and traders sold stolen secrets. She found an old contact from the war, a human named Rollo, once a communications tech, now running black market broadcasts for the forgotten colonies. Rollo stared at her with disbelief when she stepped into his den. His eyes flicked to the child, and back to her knife. Then he smiled weakly. "You're supposed to be dead," Zira answered flatly. "They tried." She handed him a chip, not the full core, but enough to taste what she had: names, plans, betrayals sealed behind friendly faces. Rollo's smile vanished as he read, his hands shaking slightly. "They'll burn entire systems to stop this," he muttered. "You know that, right?" Zara nodded. "That's why we need to move before they do." Rollo helped her contact 3 more old soldiers, all from different corners of the galaxy, all broken in their own ways. One had lost a brother to a silent execution. One had watched a colony fall because of a delayed order, and the last had once served under a general whose name now appeared on Zara's list. Within days, a hidden signal began spreading through pirate channels and forgotten relay towers. Short fragments of the truth, encrypted whispers that grew louder with every jump. Zara's voice never used directly, only the facts, only the lies revealed, and the galaxy began to stir. But they were not fast enough. One night, while her daughter was sleeping in the cot beside her, the drone pulsed red for the first time since they arrived. Motion detected outside the pod, no alarms triggered, no boots stomping, only silence and shadow. Zara grabbed her gear, motioned for the child to stay low, and opened the panel beside the bed. There was a man standing in the dark hallway, face covered by a reflective mask, weapon drawn but lowered, his stance calm, too calm. "You're Zara," he said softly, not a question. "And you're dead if you take one more step," she replied, blade already in her hand. The man chuckled, removed the mask, and revealed a face she remembered from a photo once burned by war. It was the brother of her old squad mate, the one who was left behind during the Delcar retreat. "I don't work for them," he said, "but I know who does. And they're already here." Zara let him in, but not without keeping her blade close. He explained quickly, names and places, enemies she hadn't seen yet, but who had followed her trail through every relay. Bounty hunters, corporate agents, even retired generals, and now they were closing in. "They're not just trying to stop you," he said. "They're trying to erase the idea of you." Zara looked at her daughter, who sat silently in the corner, holding the drone like a stuffed toy, eyes watching every move. And she felt a fire rise in her chest, not rage, not fear, but something deeper. She wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting for the right to exist. To be a mother, a soldier, a voice that couldn't be silenced. She made the call that night. A wideband encrypted message sent to every rebel pocket she knew. Her voice came through the systems like thunder breaking silence. "This is Zara, ex-field medic, war survivor, mother. Target of silenced truths," she said. "They tried to bury me under lies, but I'm still standing, and I have what they fear most." The response came in waves, one after another. Voices from distant systems, outlaws, deserters, exiles, and civilians who had lost everything to the same machine. Some sent weapons, some sent transport, some simply sent words, "We believe you." The station was no longer safe, so Zara moved again, boarding an old freighter owned by an independent colony ship. A place where rules were made by survival, and loyalty wasn't given but earned. On the way, her daughter sat beside her in the cockpit, watching the stars blur past, and asked quietly, "Are we still running?" Zara shook her head. "No." She said, "We're making them run now, because a system that crushed the weak only worked as long as the weak stayed quiet. But now the weak had a leader, a mother who had lost everything and still stood tall. A soldier who had walked through fire and came back holding the truth, and she wasn't going to stop. Not until every name on that list was answered for, and every silent mother like her was heard across the stars. The independent colony ship floated at the edge of known space, like a ghost in the void, its engines silent, its people hidden beneath layers of defense and secrecy. Zara stood on the outer deck beneath the reinforced dome, watching the stars burn like fireflies in darkness. Her daughter stood beside her, holding the drone that had once been a weapon, now turned guardian. Whispers had become waves. Fragments of truth spread across systems, pieces of her voice stitched together by broken rebels, ex-soldiers, and lost colonies. Some called her a traitor, some called her hope. But no one called her invisible anymore, and that meant they would come. The first sign was a ripple in deep space, scanners detecting a signal that didn't match any known route. Then came the fleet, black ships with no flags, no codes, and no mercy, the same kind that erased voices, burned records, and made sure no one remembered who fought for what. Zara didn't run this time. She stood at the edge of the command bridge as alarms blared and defensive crews scrambled. Her allies looked to her not as a leader by rank, but a leader by fire. And when she spoke, every word struck like a blade through fog. "They think fear makes us silent," she said. "But fear is only silence when we let it win." The colony ship wasn't built for war, but it had teeth, old turrets, scrapped-together shields, and pilots who had once flown suicide runs during the Great Border Wars. And now they were all hers, not because she commanded them, but because she stood for them. As the enemy fleet drew closer, broadcasting false warnings and surrender demands, Zara took the front console and sent out her own message, this time. Not encrypted, not hidden, but loud and raw across every open channel. "This is Zara," she said. "You know me now. They told you I was a traitor, a deserter, a ghost. But the truth is I was a mother they tried to silence, and now I speak. Not just for myself, but for every one of you they left behind." Across the galaxy, stations paused. Soldiers turned toward screens, miners dropped their tools, old veterans leaned closer to radios, and orphans huddled in underground tunnels watched with wide eyes as her voice echoed through stars. "They are not afraid of me," she continued. "They are afraid of what happens when you believe someone like me can stand. So now I ask you, will you stand too?" The first wave hit within minutes. Black drones diving toward the colony ship with energy bursts lighting the sky. Defense turrets fired back, shaky but determined. Explosions rocked the hull. Systems sparked, children cried. But no one ran. Zara took her daughter to the backup command room, placed a small comms headset on her, and whispered, "You are the voice now if I fall. You keep speaking, no matter what." The child nodded once, no fear in her eyes, only fire. Zara returned to the main deck, her armor patched together from old plates and scavenged gear, her blade at her side and a pulse rifle in her hands. She joined the defense crew and fired into the void, not like a trained soldier, but like a mother defending her home. More allies arrived, not in fleets, but in fragments, one scout ship from the Veiled Moon Syndicate, a cargo hauler from the Brask Rebellion, a single long-range cannon hidden in an asteroid, all answering her call in their own way. The enemy faltered, not from numbers, but from shock. They expected silence, not defiance. They expected fear, not unity. Inside the enemy command ship, shadow leaders watched as their plan unraveled. One of them slammed a fist into the console, shouting, "She's just one woman." But even they knew, one woman with a voice could be louder than 1,000 guns. Zara kept firing, shoulder bleeding, helmet cracked, breath ragged, but her hands never stopped, her voice never broke. She stood where others had fallen, because she had something they never understood. She had nothing left to lose, and everything left to protect. Then the screen lit up with a new transmission, not from her, but from Halle. He stood before the High Council on a neutral broadcast, holding the original data core, his face hollow, his voice steady. "You silenced her because she knew the truth," he said. "But I saw it too, and now I give it to the galaxy." He inserted the core into the central system. And within seconds, names, orders, betrayals, and blood-soaked lies flooded the networks. Governors fell, generals vanished, command centers burned from within. The enemy fleet around Zara's colony ship hesitated, then retreated. The silence afterward felt heavier than the battle, like the galaxy itself was holding its breath. And when it finally exhaled, something changed. Zara collapsed to her knees, not in defeat, but in relief. Her daughter ran into her arms. The drone circled above, flashing blue and green, and everyone around them knew this was the day the galaxy listened, not because she shouted, but because she refused to be silenced. Later, as the colony ship drifted slowly toward a new alliance zone, Zara stood at the front of the gathering hall, surrounded by those who once called her a ghost, now calling her leader. She didn't speak long. Just one line that echoed louder than any speech. "If they won't make room for us, we'll build something better." And with that, the crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in unity. Zara didn't want power. She didn't want a throne. She wanted something more dangerous than both. She wanted a future, and now, because she never stopped fighting, she had it. For her daughter, for every broken soldier, for every rejected voice, and for every silence waiting to be broken. Zara stood not as a hero, but as proof that no one needed permission to rise, because sometimes the strongest warriors don't come from command. They come from pain, from love, and from the fire only a mother can carry. And in that fire, they found freedom.